there's a story about a young associate pastor who is new in the community. And he's excited as he prepares and works very hard for his Pentecost homily. And so he gets up, and with the older pastor in the background watching, he gives a sermon. And he feels in today's homily, as he finishes his homily, that it was really pretty good. And so as he leaves the service and is standing outside, people are coming up affirming the message that he gave. And finally, the older pastor comes up and says to the young man, "You did a good job today." Well, trying to be humble, the young man says, "It wasn't me, it was the Holy Spirit." And the pastor looked at him and said, "Well, it wasn't that good." The gift of the Holy Spirit. These men and women, not highly educated, not much money or resources, and the Spirit is going to move them to change the world. Is it really that good? There's a story about a pastor who told people in the congregation one week, he said, "If I whisper something in your ear and then we come clear around the congregation, and when we got to the last person, what do you think would be? Would the story change?" And there were chuckles. And then he said, that sort of describes the Spirit, a whisper down the lanes of human history and different cultures and different parts of the world. But that Spirit comes and manifests its way in a diversity, but in a unique way. And today, centuries later, 2,000 years, that whisper down our lane, in our culture, in our world. And how are we open to that as a church? Here is where we drink from that Spirit. But I think on the Feast of Pentecost, we have to remember that the church is not the be-all and the end-all. That the church is at the service of the Spirit of God. And that we're about the reign of God. And anywhere people are trying to build more love and more compassion in our world, whatever they believe, we can see that as the work of the Spirit. And we can come alongside of that and work with it. But really, as we gather, it's how do we nurture that Spirit, that presence of God? I think as you stand along the Shenandoah River, we hear today drinking from the Spirit, that water continues to flow. If you would just think of rocks in the rapids, the water just continues to come. And in a sense, that's what we do. We bring all that we've brought from the week, and we ruminate, as Thomas More says, in that gift of the Spirit, and allow it to nurture and change us. Or we can think about if we took a fire, the more you bring those logs together, the hotter the coals get. And we could think of that as an image, that really it's as we come together as one, that Spirit really takes off, and that's the importance of community. This weekend we'll have 2 baptisms, Ellie Ray Myers and Adrian Wren Gallagher. But it's sort of like these little ones, we're fanning that flame of God's love that we hope continues to develop and will grow as we nurture that Spirit in them. So that when they get out of these doors, or we get out of these doors, we can be about the reign of God. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we spreading? Are we spreading the Spirit of God? Not always. Sometimes we're spreading hate or division or arrogance but we're called to not spread sickness. We're called to spread the Spirit. So maybe even the COVID vaccine could be a good example of that. You know, the Spirit, as you receive that vaccine, as we received that vaccine, we're not spreading sickness in the world, but we're spreading healing. And that's what we do when we ruminate in that Spirit. When we receive that Spirit here, we take out healing and love. And if we're not, we shouldn't go. And that's what happened in that upper room. Think about it. These men and women scared, afraid, uncertain about the future. And it was when that spirit of peace was released upon them, then they could move out. And we can know the Spirit by our effects, right? It's like we see the flame of the fire brought unity and understanding. But the effects of the Spirit is how does it bring about healing, renewal, and new life. And that's how we know we're about the work of the Spirit, how we're grounded in the Spirit. And so today, as we gather, how open are we to that Spirit? Recently, I had a conversation with a man who had done a lot of dialogue with a Hindu. And he came up with a list of some qualities that show that we're following the Spirit. And to that degree, as a community, I would say these qualities show that we're following the Spirit. And isn't it neat that a Christian and a Hindu could agree in unity of the same qualities? And this is what they are. One great sign that we're following the Spirit is humility. That we see everything and all around us in creation as a gift and not simply our own accomplishments. That our desires are a good thing, but they can also be destructive. So a freedom from attachment to our desires. The need not to always be in control, but to be open to life's surprises. And to learn to love without a need for approval. That these are qualities that we can see show that we are following the Spirit, and we'll see the effects in the world around us. And so today, we hear in the prayers that we've come to the completion of the Paschal mystery, the Easter season. But how do we see this as a new start? Like those first disciples, with a lot of fear sometimes, a lot of uncertainty in the world from COVID. But do we believe that here we receive that Spirit? And do we believe that it really is that good?